The underdog daughter-in-law, Emily Tran, a 27-year-old woman of Vietnamese descent, grew up in a vibrant community in Seattle. Her dream was always to create her own story on American soil, believing in the value of hard work and kindness, no matter where she landed. Bright, independent, and a little bit shy in big crowds, Emily was the type who would always show up early to help set up an event, but quietly blend into the background when it started. After meeting Alex Williams, a charismatic 32-year-old architect from Austin, through mutual friends at a 4th of July picnic, it didn't take long for sparks to fly. Alex made her laugh, even when she was anxious, and always insisted that she shouldn't change to fit anyone's expectations, not even his family's. To Emily, that was all the reassurance she needed to take the next step in their relationship. However, everything shifted after marriage. Emily moved to Texas with Alex, bracing herself for a new life with his close-knit and somewhat old-fashioned family. From the get-go, she felt like she was attending an endless tryout. Alex's mother, Patricia Williams, carried an air of quiet disapproval. Patricia, a well-respected local church leader and retired school principal, had a sharp eye and strong opinions about which women fit into her legacy. Patricia's glances always lingered on Emily's choices: her vegetarian meals at the barbecue, her careful English tinged with a Seattle accent, her reluctance to join in on gossip. Emily noticed the subtle reminders that she wasn't the daughter-in-law Patricia would have chosen. At family dinners, Patricia praised Alex's ex-girlfriend in front of everyone, or shared stories of other women who would have made the Williams name proud. The message was clear: Emily was never quite enough. Despite her best efforts to adapt, learn, and bond with Alex's relatives, Emily always felt the sting of being on the outside. She went to great lengths to hide her hurt, determined to be polite and respectful, no matter how Patricia treated her. But behind each polite smile, Emily's confidence took small hits. In the safety of her journal, she wrote about her loneliness and the way Alex's extended family whispered when she entered the room. Mornings became harder, and the weight of trying to belong often overshadowed her initial excitement about this new chapter in Texas. Yet, beneath her gentle exterior, Emily's spirit remained resilient. She promised herself that she wouldn't let resentment define her marriage or her own self-worth. Instead, she quietly resolved if she was going to make it in Texas, she'd do it on her own terms, no matter how long that took or how many obstacles Patricia threw her way. The clash of cultures. From the moment Emily stepped into Alex's family home, the stark differences between her cultural background and that of the Williams family became impossible to ignore. Though Emily wasn't a stranger to American traditions, the South felt like a country of its own, with its emphasis on Sunday church, sweet tea, and yes, ma'ams. Even the sense of humor felt different. What passed for a gentle tease in Seattle sometimes felt like a veiled jab in Texas. Patricia often commented, "We do things a certain way in this house." Her words, accompanied by a pointed glance at Emily's unfamiliar dishes on potluck nights. Emily loved bringing homemade banh mi sandwiches or spring rolls, hoping to share a piece of her upbringing. But these efforts were met with polite but reserved smiles. "That's interesting," someone would mutter, pushing the food around on their plate. If a dish remained untouched, Emily could sense Patricia's disappointment shimmering just beneath the surface. Church gatherings were another arena for cultural tension. While the Williams family had generations-deep involvement in their local Baptist church, Emily felt adrift. She tried joining Sunday school and volunteering for bake sales, but every invitation seemed laden with unspoken requirements. Knowledge of hymns, childhood stories, the ability to swap gossip about people she barely knew. If she brought a Vietnamese dessert to a potluck, it was often left on the table untouched, while casseroles vanished in minutes. Holidays amplified these contrasts. Emily decorated a tree in December, but included small paper lanterns from her own childhood New Year celebrations. Patricia once commented, "That's sweet, dear, but we don't really do that here," as if tradition belonged squarely to one side of the family. At Thanksgiving, Emily volunteered to cook a tofu entree for herself. Patricia quietly set it aside, whispering to an aunt, "She's just not used to our food yet." Conversations about family expectations only deepened the gulf. The Williamses talked about legacy, reputation, and fitting in, implying that conformity was a badge of honor. Emily's parents, in contrast, always encouraged uniqueness, to keep her head down, work hard, and cherish her roots. Simple things like refusing a second helping at dinner or hesitating to join in a heated family debate would earn her sidelong glances, as if she were breaking some invisible rule she'd never known existed. Still, Emily did her best to bridge the gap. She learned a few Texan recipes, started watching college football, even picked up some local slang. Yet every attempt seemed to draw a new line in the sand. Patricia's comments remained ever so slightly barbed. "Maybe one day you'll really feel at home here." Emily often wondered if the gap wasn't just about food, language, or customs, but about hearts that insist on clinging to their own way. For Emily, the real challenge wasn't just blending her own culture into the Williams family. It was daring to do so without losing herself entirely in the process. The pain of discovering the truth. Emily always prided herself on seeing the best in people. She believed kindness, even in the face of indifference, could melt the coldest heart. But as weeks turned into months, the chill between her and Patricia only seemed to deepen. By the time their first winter in Texas rolled around, Emily began noticing things that didn't quite add up, and the pain of those discoveries would change the course of her life in the Williams family forever. It started with the whispers. Family gatherings at the Williams' sprawling house didn't lack for conversation, but Emily noticed how certain topics tapered off whenever she drew near. Laughter dulled, eyes flicked in her direction, and then someone would change the subject, or quietly leave the room. At first, Emily dismissed it as her own awkwardness. Perhaps she was simply slow to warm up to everyone. But then, she started finding traces of her name woven into stories that didn't sound quite right. Stories of things she supposedly said, or complaints she never filed. Misunderstandings that always seemed to escalate behind her back. One afternoon, as Emily cleaned up in the kitchen after another family potluck, she overheard Patricia talking in low tones to Aunt Susan. "I just don't think she really understands how things work here," Patricia murmured, her voice laced with resigned disappointment. "Alex is too good for all this confusion." The words seared, but what truly unsettled Emily was the realization that the rumors flying around the extended family seemed to start right in Patricia's kitchen. Soon after, Alex began coming home, tense and withdrawn. He'd greet Emily with a strained half-smile, often distracted by messages pinging on his phone from siblings and relatives. And when Emily reached out to comfort him or ask what was wrong, he would only say, "It's just family stuff, Em. Old wounds. Don't worry about it." But one evening, she caught sight of a series of messages left open on his laptop, written by Patricia to Alex and his siblings. The thread was a subtle but relentless campaign, casting Emily as someone manipulative, untrustworthy, and alien to their ways. The narrative crafted by Patricia implied that Emily had been making demands, sowing discord between Alex and his siblings, and even speaking ill of the Williams name to outsiders. Emily felt her breath leave her body, replaced by a cold ache. In that moment, the source of her growing isolation snapped into focus with blinding clarity. It wasn't just a matter of accidental alienation, but a deliberate campaign led by the very matriarch she'd spent months trying to please. She felt grief, not only for herself, but for Alex, who was caught in the web Patricia spun. Despite the shock, Emily resolved not to let herself be torn down. She started quietly collecting evidence, saving texts, jotting notes from overheard conversations, and even discreetly setting her phone to record during tense moments. She documented every twist and cruelties, compiling a portrait of the campaign waged against her. Sleep became scarce. Emily spent long nights rereading messages and reliving stinging words, doubt gnawing at her self-worth. She questioned everything: her marriage, her identity, her right to claim a place in this family. But as the pain simmered, so too did her determination. Emily's heartbreak crystallized into a steely resolve. She would not allow her name to be dragged through the mud without a fight. Her world felt lonelier than ever, but she found clarity in her purpose. The time would come when the truth needed to be brought into the light, no matter how much it hurt or who would be forced to finally see Patricia through clear eyes. For now, Emily endured, day by day, quietly gathering every piece of truth. Even in her anguish, she hoped that by exposing the cruelty, she might finally win her chance at genuine belonging, or at the very least, reclaim her dignity in a home that had never welcomed her. The determination to reclaim justice. Emily's anguish from betrayal did not turn her bitter. Instead, it ignited a quiet, but fierce, resolution. Where she'd once only yearned for acceptance, she now realized she owed herself something more vital: justice, truth, and the dignity to tell her side of the story. She knew that acting impulsively might inflame the situation, but the thought of remaining a silent victim was no longer an option. She decided to approach her challenge not as a battle of anger, but as a mission for clarity. Emily began by documenting her daily life in the Williams home. She kept notes of conversations, subtle insults, and the moments Patricia contradicted herself. Relying on her instincts, she started saving text messages, photographing notes left on the kitchen counter, and, when necessary, discreetly recording interactions where Patricia's words dripped with malice, veiled in politeness. Each night, after Alex fell asleep, Emily would sit by the soft glow of her laptop, organizing a growing file of evidence. Not out of spite, but so she could finally present the truth if needed. She reflected on her upbringing, channeling the patience and strength her own mother had shown when facing adversity. As the folder of proof grew, so did Emily's sense of agency and self-worth. No longer was she just weathering Patricia's orchestrated storms. She was, finally, building her own lighthouse. Emily hesitated over how and when to reveal what she'd uncovered. She sought quiet guidance from her closest friends back in Seattle, careful not to say too much, but enough to gain perspective. Their support reassured her. "You aren't imagining any of this. You deserve more." It gave her just enough confidence to keep moving forward. The opportunity came as Thanksgiving approached, a time when the entire Williams clan, usually scattered across Texas and beyond, would gather under one roof. Emily resolved this was the moment to finally speak her truth. The stakes were high, but the cost of silence felt far worse. On the eve of the reunion, Emily rehearsed her words over and over, not an accusation, but a plea for honesty and healing. She organized every message, recording, and note, printing them and storing the digital backups carefully. The night before Thanksgiving, she barely slept, replaying every painful exchange in her mind, steadying herself with the reminder that she wasn't just correcting a lie. She was reclaiming her dignity. When Thanksgiving Day arrived, Emily found herself both anxious and unusually calm. She dressed carefully, drawing a sense of comfort from the necklace her mother had given her as a wedding gift, a quiet reminder of her family's strength. The Williams family, bustling about with pies and football games, seemed oblivious to the silent storm about to break. Alex, as always, was sandwiched awkwardly between his mother and his wife, unable to see the battle lines that had long since crystallized in their home. As dinner drew to a close, with the entire family gathered in the living room, Emily took a deep breath. The clinking of dessert plates faded to silence as she rose. Her voice trembled at first, then gained strength. There are things being said about me that aren't true. I want us to face them together, openly, honestly. She unfolded her carefully collected evidence and spoke from the heart, describing the loneliness and isolation, the slights that had added up over months, and the quiet campaign that had nearly broken her spirit. Family members exchanged stunned glances as Emily played recordings, read aloud messages, and presented the proof of Patricia's manipulations. For the first time, the truth was out in the open, raw and unvarnished. There was no yelling, no accusations, just the weight of undeniable evidence and a plea for understanding. Even Alex, pale and shaken, finally saw the web that had ensnared them all. In that moment, Emily felt both exposed and liberated. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth. By daring to break the silence and bring Patricia's actions into the light, she showed every person in the room that dignity was worth fighting for, even if it cost her the ease of silence or the illusion of peace. The aftermath would not be easy, but for the first time since arriving in Texas, Emily felt truly seen, her voice echoing in a room that had too long refused to hear her. The fateful family reunion. Thanksgiving dawned cold and bright. The ranch house sparkled with autumn decorations and the bustling noise of relatives arriving from across the state. The warmth of the occasion was tinged with nervous energy. Emily wore her best dress and the necklace her mother had given her, holding close the comfort of her origins, even as she prepared to face the family who'd never fully embraced her. Alex, caught in the undercurrent of his family's tension, moved through the house distractedly, humble, nervous, unsure where his loyalties lay. Patricia orchestrated the day as always, offering warm greetings, shepherding pies and casseroles to the dining room, assigning roles with a practiced hand. As guests arrived, Emily felt hundreds of small eyes on her, evaluating, measuring, searching for one more reason she didn't quite belong. But beneath the surface ceremony, a pressure built. Emily could sense it in the clipped way cousins exchanged glances, in Patricia's rigid posture, in Alex's forced smile.
That's him.
It seemed that everyone was waiting for something, not knowing that today would bring a reckoning. The first courses passed in a blur: roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, cornbread stuffing, and polite conversation. Emily, usually reserved, found herself observing the scene with a sense of detachment, steeling herself for what came next. When the meal wound down and dessert plates clinked softly against the wooden table, she rose from her place, hands trembling, but voice anchored in something immovable. "I need to say something," she began, her words slicing through the room's ambient warmth. A hush fell. She could feel her heart pounding, but she pushed on. "I know there have been things said about me, things that simply aren't true. I haven't wanted to cause pain or division, but I can't stay silent any longer." Alex looked up in confusion. Patricia froze. There was a tightening around her eyes, but she said nothing. Emily stepped forward, her folder of evidence shaking in her hand, and explained in measured tones the rumors and accusations that had followed her for months. She read aloud a handful of exchanged messages, including Patricia's own words from the family group chat, careful to present only facts, never stooping to vindictiveness. As she continued, sharing some of the cruel remarks and patterns she'd meticulously recorded, the room shifted from tense to shocked. Some members looked away in shame. Others blinked back disbelief or confusion. Emily's narrative landed with the quiet force of truth, long denied, a story unfurled in public, impossible to dismiss. She finished by looking each family member in the eye, her voice clear.
David, look at
"I
me.
love
Just
Alex,
talk to me.
and I came into this family hoping for acceptance, but I can't let my dignity be eroded or be blamed for things I haven't done. All I want is honesty and respect. For myself, for everyone." Silence stretched for a long, painful moment. Patricia's mouth opened and closed,
Thank you. I promise
but
I'll
no
return
words
soon.
came. Alex, pale and shaken, reached for Emily's hand under the table, finally seeing the full picture. Around the dining room, a murmur began. Cousins, uncles, aunts processing the revelations, re-examining the foundation of family unity they'd assumed was inviolable. Emily had not intended to break the family apart, only to let in the sunlight that brings healing. Her courage to confront the deception did not just vindicate herself. It paved the way for the Williams clan to reconsider what kind of family they truly wanted to be. For the first time, Emily felt seen, not as the outsider or scapegoat, but as someone who demanded truth and earned respect by refusing to let falsity define her. What happened next would not be easy, but she was ready for it. The truth comes to light. The living room was still humming with the faded echoes of the Thanksgiving confrontation when Emily sat down, surrounded by a stunned and humbled crowd. The air crackled with uncertainty, silence spreading out like ripples in a pond. After her revelations, Patricia, who had always ruled the Williams household with her glacial composure and subtle commands, found herself on foreign ground. Her mask finally slipping just enough for everyone to peer beneath it. Emily felt as if her heart might burst from the effort it had taken to stand in the center of that room and lay bare her pain. She looked at her trembling hands, which had only minutes ago held up a stack of printed messages and emails for everyone to see. It was surreal. After all her quiet endurance, her ghostly isolation, she now had the power of truth on her side, and, suddenly, she was no longer invisible. Around her, the family seemed frozen in a waking dream. Alex sat by her side, hands tight around his coffee mug, his gaze darting between his wife and mother, as though trying to piece together a new reality. Cousins whispered behind napkins. Two of Patricia's sisters stared at her, mouths agape. The room, always filled with the easy chatter of shared history, had become a place where uncomfortable truths refused to stay buried. It was Alex who broke the stillness, his voice carefully restrained, but edged with newfound conviction. "We've all seen and heard enough tonight to know something has been terribly wrong." He turned to his mother, not angry, but genuinely hurt. "Why did it have to come to this, Mom? Why couldn't we just welcome Emily like family from the start?" Patricia's face, so unflappable for so long, flickered with a storm of emotions. Pride, shame, fear, and, at last, vulnerability. For the first time since Emily had met her, the older woman was at a loss for words. The other relatives watched as Patricia squared her shoulders, prepared to launch one of her signature retorts. But the timing was gone, as was the certainty that she'd be backed by silent agreement. Emily's breath caught when Patricia finally spoke, her voice brittle. "I only wanted what was best for my family. Change. Change isn't easy." The words hung in the room, but their weight felt lighter than the burden Patricia had carried for years. One uncle, who'd always kept his distance from the family drama, surprised everyone by speaking up, his Texan drawl soft but firm. "We may not always see things the same way, Pat, but what's been said and done behind closed doors, this isn't right. We need to talk about what kind of people we really are." Those who'd once averted their eyes when Emily entered a room now looked at her with something like remorse. Aunt Susan, who had listened to Patricia's complaints for years, rose shakily and walked over, tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Emily. We let this go on too long. You deserved much more kindness and honesty from us." She squeezed Emily's shoulder, and that simple gesture broke the dam of shared guilt. Others added their apologies, some clumsy, some heartfelt, and the room was transformed again. No longer a court of accusation, but a gathering where healing could, just maybe, begin. Emily didn't claim victory. She didn't need anyone to grovel or fall to pieces. Her triumph was quieter, more internal. For the first time since her move to Texas, she was seen not through the lens of suspicion or prejudice, but as her own person, flawed and brave. She felt the years-old wounds begin to stitch together, slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. Patricia, recognizing the shift, faced a long moment of reckoning. Her attempts to manage and control the narrative had failed. Now, stripped of pretense, she sat quietly, honoring the silence Emily had filled with truth. "I'll need time," she finally admitted, her eyes brimming. "Things won't just change overnight. I hope you can understand that." Emily wasn't looking for instant reconciliation. In her heart, she held no illusions about sudden, miraculous closeness. But she responded with warmth in her quiet voice. "I don't want perfection, Patricia. I just want space to be myself, and for us to treat each other honestly." A sense of relief, even exhaustion, swept through Emily's body as she realized the most important battles aren't won with shouting, but with persistence, clarity, and courage. The Williamses' Thanksgiving would be talked about for years, not because of a spectacular argument, but because the truth, patient and long buried, finally had its day in the sun. From that evening onward, no one in the family could claim ignorance. Patricia's usual grip softened ever so slightly, while Alex stood taller beside his wife. The relatives, though uncertain of the road ahead, gave Emily something she'd missed for so long, the promise of respect. Later that night, as she and Alex made their way home through the chilly Texas twilight, Emily breathed more freely than she had in years. She grasped her husband's hand, feeling his silent solidarity at last. The future wouldn't be easy or perfect, but it would be honest. And for Emily, honesty was the first and brightest step toward truly belonging. A new journey for Jennifer. When the echo of those turbulent days finally faded, Jennifer realized she was standing at the threshold of a completely new chapter in her life. The painful, raw confrontation that had once terrified her now felt like a doorway cracked open, a chance to step out of the cycle of tension and suspicion and into something more honest and true. The relief was real, but so was the uncertainty. Who would she become now that she no longer had to measure each word against a backdrop of judgment and distrust? The days after Thanksgiving felt different. For the first time, Jennifer walked through the Williams house and sensed that the old, invisible barriers had thinned. Cousins smiled at her without awkwardness, aunts offered help in the kitchen, and even the younger kids ran to her side, asking for stories or sneaking treats from her hands. The air was lighter, but Jennifer's journey was just beginning. The difficult unveiling of the truth had not magically fixed every relationship, but it had forced a reckoning within the entire family. Walls built over years of misunderstanding, and small resentments rarely fell in a single night. She approached each cautious smile or nervous apology with gentle patience, knowing that true healing would require both space and time. Jennifer also turned inward, reflecting on what she truly wanted out of her life in America, the things she had set aside during her struggle to fit in, and the dreams she had yet to chase. She found herself returning to small daily rituals that had given her comfort back in Seattle, tending a tiny herb garden on the porch, brewing a rich Vietnamese café on weekend mornings, and journaling her thoughts in both English and Vietnamese. Each act became a private celebration of her roots and her resilience. The ordeal with Patricia and the Williams family had taught Jennifer more about courage than she ever thought possible. There had been moments, many if she was honest, when she'd thought of giving up entirely, of packing her bags and retreating home. But now, with the battle behind her, she saw how those moments of pain had also forged an inner strength she hadn't recognized. She realized she no longer needed to shrink herself or make her light any smaller. Her difference, once a target for suspicion, had helped her carve out a sense of self that could not be easily shaken. Jennifer became increasingly open about sharing her story, both the struggles and the triumphs, at her church group, among new friends, and in support communities for immigrants and interracial families. She began volunteering at a local community center, helping other newcomers navigate the complex web of customs, unspoken expectations, and daily pressures that often felt overwhelming at first. Through this work, Jennifer rediscovered not only a sense of belonging, but the profound satisfaction of lifting others as she rebuilt herself. With Alex, her relationship took on new depth. The ordeal had tested their love, sometimes to the breaking point, but facing the hard truths together had ultimately brought them closer. They learned to communicate past their silences. Alex began to see the weight Jennifer had borne in secret, while she realized he, too, was learning how to stand up for her, even as he untangled his loyalties. Together, they set new boundaries with Patricia and the rest of the Williams clan. Honesty would be the foundation, not tradition or comfort. It was never perfect, but every awkward conversation and stumble became a brick in the new home they were building, one rooted in their shared choices rather than inherited expectations. Little by little, Jennifer also reclaimed those dreams she'd once tucked away. She enrolled in evening classes at the nearest college, excited by the prospect of earning a degree in social work, a field where her empathy and lived experience could become true assets. Some days were challenging, textbooks stacked high on the kitchen table, late-night assignments, the exhaustion of balancing studies and home life. Yet each accomplishment, however small, was a celebration of how far she'd come from being defined solely as Alex's wife or the outsider daughter-in-law. Through all of this, Jennifer kept one foot in both worlds, cherishing the traditions of her Vietnamese heritage while weaving new pieces of Texas into the tapestry of her identity. She hosted gatherings where family recipes shared space with cornbread, invited cousins to Vietnamese New Year celebrations, and gently corrected misconceptions when they arose. For some in the Williams family, change came slowly. Old habits and prejudices did not simply disappear. But Jennifer's patience and steady openness made a difference. Even Patricia, her former critic, began reaching out, at first with apologies carefully measured, and later, over time, with genuine efforts to connect. The legacy of that fateful Thanksgiving was not just the public airing of grievances or the recalibration of family roles. It was the creation of a new kind of belonging, one built on transparency and mutual respect. Jennifer understood now that her worth was not contingent on anyone's approval. She could stand tall, offering kindness when warranted, boundaries when necessary, and forgiveness when she felt strong enough. She modeled for others, especially the younger generation, what it meant to claim a place in the world by simply being unafraid to live one's truth. And the story wasn't over. Jennifer found joy in small victories, laughter echoing around the same table that once hosted so much tension, unexpected phone calls from relatives asking for her advice, holiday invitations that included her favorite foods without prompting. She sent photos and emails home to Seattle, sharing her newfound confidence with loved ones, and cherished the feeling that, finally, she could call this place home, not because she was tolerated or endured, but because she was accepted as herself. Looking forward, Jennifer felt a deep, glowing optimism. There would always be hard days, the ache of homesickness, the shadow of old hurts, but she was anchored by the certainty that she had weathered the storm and emerged transformed. Her journey reminded her that true community was not built by erasing differences, but by honoring them, and that belonging was about truth, effort, and the quiet endurance to keep showing up, even after the hardest reckonings. As seasons changed and her world kept expanding,
This is lovely.
Jennifer
I'll take
moved
it.
forward
Thank you. That
with a
means
heart
lot.
both softer and stronger than before. She knew that in America, as in life, being accepted is often an act of persistent courage. And every morning, she woke with gratitude for the chance to tell her own story anew on her own terms.